Hello, everybody. This is Denny Buck, the old safety guy. When Seth called me about this topic, I thought, how can we do something that would be of value to our construction community? I thought, well, what kind of questions would a construction company owner ask about opioids? What do we need to know in our industry? So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to, offer a couple questions and probably explain some of the things where they came from. So let's start that way. So opioids, what are they? Well, there's legal opioids like Percocet and Oxycontin and Vicodin, morphine, and even fentanyl is in that legal category. And then the illegal opioids would be things like heroin and opium, and there's synthetic opioids, which are things like fentanyl mixed with heroin. So that's what the problem is. We got legal ones that probably were overprescribed years ago, and now we have a big influx of the illegal use. So the first question, I think, or another question would be, where do they come from? How do we get them? So I think I did a little research, and it looks like about 15 years ago, the drug companies invented these painkillers, and they really promoted the things hard. Uh, One of the big eye-opening cases was this Purdue pharmacy. They were having pain relief seminars for doctors to attend, and they wooed them pretty much and really promoted their variety of painkillers. And then obviously the doctors started using them, thinking they were pretty safe and nobody would get addicted. I just recently read that Purdue Pharmacy, who was probably the initial drug company that started the heavy promotion of opioids, uh, they settled. They were being sued by everybody for overprescribing, and they recently settled. Just last year, 2020, they settled for $8 billion they paid out, and then they filed bankruptcy. So the problem back then was here's all these new painkillers, and doctors were prescribing them pretty heavily, and they worked. And then when you were done with that painkiller, you still wanted them, so that's what's happened. People continue to use them either illegally or legally. So maybe another question a construction company would have, do we really have a problem in construction? Are my employees using legal or illegal opioids? So if we look, there's lots and lots of information available about this. One of the things I found was CDC, Center for Disease Control. They just recently reported 60,000 overdose deaths in 2020. That's all. That's not construction. That's all deaths, all people. And it was a 30% increase from the year prior. 30% increase. Amazing. And then the Center for Construction Research and Training, the CPWR, they did a big study in 2000. They looked at use from 2011 to 2017, and that was just in construction. And this was kind of eye-opening for me. They found that about 10% of all construction workers use legal opioids. So that was kind of alarming, thinking 10% of the people on our jobs are using, some kind of painkillers. And then they reported that 25% of injured employees use prescribed opioids, also alarming. And they also found that about 21% of our construction workers use illicit drugs. major problem. So yes, we have a problem in construction. And another thing I thought was a little bit interesting, age groups. They found that people between construction workers between ages 16 and 49, about 8% of that group uses legal opioids, and people older from 50 up, construction workers from 50 years old and up, there's a 14% legal use of opioids. Interesting. So thinking that the young people would use them more than the old is not true. We got to be aware and concerned about our older workers. Uh, so interesting facts. And if you want more information, go on, those CDC guidelines. NIOSH has a lot of information about it. The CPWR has lots and lots of information about that big study they did. But yes, we have a problem of opioid use, legal and illegal use in construction. So I think every construction owner, contractor needs to have some awareness of this and some plan for dealing with it. Probably, this has been quite some time ago. I remember a employer called me. He had a metal fabrication shop. It was down along the Pennsylvania border, close to Maryland. So he had a workplace fatality. He had a small shop, 9 employees, and one of his employees was lifting a beam to do some welding fabrication. They had it sitting on sawhorses. They used the overhead crane to pick it up, to flip it over, to do some work on the other side. And somehow he got his head to the floor before the chunk of steel fell on his head. So during the autopsy, they found that he had illegal drugs in his system. The employer was like overwhelmed. He said, "I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it." And when I was talking to him in his office, he said, I just had no clue that, I said, I work with these guys, I hunt with them, I fish with them. He had no inkling that that employee was using drugs. So he thought, well, maybe I better put a drug policy in place for my little company. So he did. So he met with his 8 guys and said, hey, here's what happened and here's what we got to do. So he said, here, we're going to put a drug policy in place. We're going to probably have to do some, random drug testing. So out of the 8 employees that were left, 2 left his employment and 2 more came to him and said, yes, we have problems. So out of his 9 employees, 5 of them were involved with illegal opioids, illegal drugs. He said he was just dumbfounded. So it's hard for us in construction on the sites to know who's using and who isn't. Very difficult. So that was, an eye-opening story for me. That was probably 8, 9, maybe even 10 years ago that happened. And then my own personal experience, about 6, 7 years ago, I had a tooth pulled. So the doc said, hey, I'll give you some painkillers. Yeah, good. So he did, and they really worked. They really took the pain away. Give me a bottle full of them. He said, just use them till they're done. So I don't know, it was a bottle full of them. And I used a couple for a couple of days and until everything healed up was fine. Then more recently, I had some melanoma cut off the top of my head. I don't know if let's see if we can see this. Can you see that, Seth? That was the top of my head.
Yeah. Yes. Yep. We can see it.
So pretty ugly. But after that occurred, after he was done cutting away there, I said, "Hey, Doc, is this thing going to hurt tonight?" He said, "Oh yeah," and he he stitched it all up and he pulled it real tight. And when he did, he said, "You ready for your facelift?" And when he pulled all the stitches real tight, it actually took the wrinkles out of this one side of my forehead. It pulled the wrinkles up. So I said, "Well, am I going to need some painkillers?" He said, "Just take Tylenol." So the doctors, the whole medical community is very, very aware of overuse of opioids. And now they're very, very stingy, and probably rightfully so, with prescribing these things. There's been all kinds of legal issues with overprescription writing for opioids. So maybe the next question was, yes, we have a problem in construction. Um, we know it's difficult for an employer to identify problems with his employees. So maybe an obvious question would be, what can an employer do? How do you deal with this in your own company? So I think there's a couple of things that you can do as an employer. Probably, I know we're desperate, the industry is desperate for workers. We're hiring people like crazy, but it's probably a good idea. I know it's expensive, but probably a good idea to do some kind of pre-employment physicals. Uh, Try not to hire people that have the problem. Your pre-employment physical will identify that. And then probably the next best thing we could do is make sure our workplaces are as hazard free as they can be. Put together a good safety and health program, make sure your program has, provisions in for self-inspections and how you deal with the issues and how you report issues. Uh, be some disciplinary policy in your safety program. So create workplaces that are hazard free as possible so we don't send our employees to the doctors where they get prescribed these things and then eventually get hooked on them. So maybe another thing a company could do is training. Uh, Foreman train, first line, supervisory training, the foremen that are out there with the guys working every day. There's training programs available, how to identify use, although it's very, very hard. But maybe if the guys take extended lunch breaks, maybe if they come to work late, or maybe if they miss a couple days work, could be indications that the guy has an issue or a problem. So employee foreman training would be a good thing to do to help resolve the issue. Maybe some toolbox talks with the guys, explaining, hey, here's our policy. If you have problems, come see us. Uh, People on drugs are usually dangerous workers, so here's the things to look for. Probably a company should have some kind of a random drug testing policy that typically scares or makes employees aware that they could get caught. Maybe I shouldn't be working here. But then there are legal implications with that, how you do it, how you employ it. But a random drug testing policy would be, I think, a smart thing for an employer to do. Uh, then some kind of an employee assistance policy. If we do find a couple of workers, or 10% of our workers use legal opioids and 21% use illegal. So we probably have those on our job sites. So how do we deal with it when we do discover or find, or they come to you and say, "I got a problem"? Another avenue would be some kind of a employee assistance policy or program to help those people who want to get clean. And then if we do need to send workers to for medical attention, you probably, as an employer, need to stay involved with that medical provider. What are we prescribing? Hey, we got light duty work, so we don't want to leave the guys at home get hooked on things. So involvement with your medical provider would be a good thing to do. Then, of course, post-accident drug testing is almost everybody's pretty much doing that, but it would help identify if there was a problem with the guy that did get hurt. And then probably the last thing I could think of was, just you got to keep educating yourself as an employer, educating yourself about this whole issue. What are they? How do we take care of it? And how do we deal with this? So those are some of the things. Just to recap, pre-employment, employer can do pre-employment physicals, you know, generate a good, safe workplace where people are unlikely to be hurt. Foreman training, toolbox talks, random drug testing, employee assistance programs, medical involvement, treatment involvement with your provider, and then the post-accident drug testing. So those are some of the thoughts I had about what we can do or what we should be thinking about to make our jobs, keep our people good, safe, send them home in good shape every night. So that's a little overview of what I had. Yes, we have a problem in construction. The numbers have proved that. So we have to have some kind of a policy to take care of our people, take care of our companies. And that's about what I had for today.